Okay. Uh, Hello, everyone. I am not so sure of what the time is on your end. From my end, it's Friday. Quite a number of us are just getting out of work, and others are already at their places of recreation. And you and I are here today. We have decided to set apart some few, minutes to be able to learn. And I hope that at the end of the day, the sacrifice that you've made and the time that we are giving to this session is going to be fruitful. So my name is Adam Shem. I am the Programs Associate at Liberty Sparks Kenya. And today we are going to have our very first episode that is based on the story of Jonathan Garibaldi, that is The Island Beyond. And after that, we are going to be having a session based on that story, themed Spontaneous Order and the Invisible Hand. And this session is going to be taken through, or is going to be handled by none other than Wakili. And the order of today's session is going to be very, very simple. We are going to start with watching the video. As soon as we are done watching the video, we are going to bring on board our speaker who's going to be speaking with us today and is going to be sharing some wisdom with us today. And I hope that you're going to tune in and you're going to, learn. We are going to be as well taking attendance. So I am going to be sharing an attendance form, a Google link form on the comment section. And there is going to be a secret word that you have to key into that form for you to be able to fill it. And today's secret word is order. So if you're just joining right now and you need to sign the attendance form, just know that today's secret word is order. So write it down somewhere so that when you get to see the form, you are able to sign it and secure yourself a chance to win quite the number of goodies we have for those who will be attending close to 80% of this session. So now this is the first session and we'll be having them at least every week. So I'm going to bring on board my colleague, Ronnie. Ronnie, if you're ready, you can please begin sharing your screen so that I can bring it up. And he's going to share with us today's video so that we can view it. Ronnie, you can go ahead and play.
Okay. Huh. Good morning, Captain.
Top of the morning to you, Jonathan. In good health, are ya?
I'm fine, sir. It's business as usual. After my chores today, I'll be off for a little sail and breeze.
At least be careful. These old sea lion bones can tell there's a storm brewing on the horizon.
Huh? Sure, if you say so, Captain. I have to go see some of our regulars. See you next week. Bye. Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Sailing again, John.
Bye.
yes, of course, Dad. What else?
Jonathan, maybe you should stay close. The clouds look pretty dark.
Huh? Don't worry, I don't plan to be long.
Bye, son.
Phew. At least a storm would be something exciting for a change.
Jonathan. 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 Wake up.
Oh no. Oh, God. Oh.
Hey, look out!
Hey, what's the problem?
Huh? Oh, wow. At last, something new.
Let go of me, and give that back to me.
Huh?
I told you to let go of me.
Hey, whoa!
Out of my way, chump.
Please, help me.
I have to find help. Huh? Please, sir, help! A gang of men have captured a woman, and she needs help!
Don't be alarmed. She's under arrest.
Arrest? She didn't look like a criminal. What was her crime?
Well, if you must know, she threatened the jobs of everyone working here.
She threatened people's jobs? How did she do that?
We are tree workers. We knock down trees for wood by beating them with these sticks. Sometimes 100 men working round the clock can knock down a good-sized tree in less than a month. But that insufferable woman, she came to work this morning with a sharp piece of metal attached to the end of her stick. She cut down a tree in less than an hour, all by herself. Think of it! Such an outrageous threat to our traditional employment had to be stopped.
But her invention allows people of all sizes and strengths to cut down trees.
What do you mean? How could anyone encourage an idea like that? This noble work can't be done by any weakling who comes along with some new idea.
But sir, these good tree workers have talented hands and brains. They could use the time saved from knocking down trees to do other things. They could make tables, cabinets, boats, or even houses.
Listen, you. The purpose of work is to have full and secure employment, not new things. You sound like some kind of troublemaker. Anyone who supports that infernal woman is trouble. Where are you from? So, are you a troublemaker, huh?
No, sir. I don't mean any trouble, sir. I don't even know that woman. I'm sure you're right. Well, I must be going. Have a productive day.
Go find the boys. After they deal with that woman, have them keep an eye on the kid. Why are you still standing there? Go find Moss and Sully. Two troublemakers in one day. No matter. That kid will also get what's coming to him.
All right. Thank you so much, Ronnie. I hope you guys have had a gist of what we are going to be having, or we'll be talking about today. I am now bringing up the slide for our speaker of the day. And our speaker of the day is none other than Mr. Obonyo Lereko Moronge, who is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and a lecturer in law at the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture Technology School of Law, where he teaches intellectual property law, contract law, and criminal law. He is also a strong advocate of free markets, individual liberty, and the rule of law. He holds a Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of Nairobi and a Master's of Laws in the Law of International Trade from the University of Wales. Mr. Obonyo has also co-authored a book, Contract Law, published by Law Africa. He is also a partner in Obonyo and Osiemo Advocates and a member of the International Relations Society of Kenya. Now, while I bring up his his slide, please drop a few claps for Wakili on the chat box so that we can prepare some ground for him to come on board. Meanwhile, I have as well shared, I can't see you guys clapping now. Meanwhile, I have as well shared the link for the attendance today. And like I said, the secret word for the day, or the secret code for the day, is order. So I am waiting for some few more claps so that I can bring Wakili up. Your claps are not yet enough for Wakili to just, begin talking. Remember, he's charging by the hour, so let us try and add more claps. Thank you. Wakili, your slides are up now. My colleague Ronnie is going to be assisting with ensuring that he gets to assist you to navigate them. So over to you, Wakili.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and to talk about a subject that's pretty much close to my heart. Right. Now, this is the first episode of this series. It's called The Island Beyond: Spontaneous Order and the Invisible Hand. Now, we'll first go through a synopsis of the video in about 2 or 3 minutes. Now, you see 4 men trying to chop a tree using wooden planks, and a lady is arrested for preventing the men from working. And how is she doing it? By inventing a new implement for efficiently chopping down trees. Well, from the discussion, or the narration rather, it's clearly an axe. And what the guy says is that it takes about 100 men working around the clock, less than a month, to knock down a tree. I mean, quite an expense of energy for a very low productivity exploit. But then with an axe, the lady did so in an hour with a new tool. And this brings us to the questions that Jonathan has. I mean, why should she be arrested for such a crime? And isn't it more efficient to chop a tree than axe? And he also comments, the men have got talented brains and hands. Won't their talents be more gainfully employed elsewhere, making tables, cabinets, boats, or even houses? And so to open the discussion, we'll first reflect on the themes that come to mind after watching the first episode. Now, the main theme that comes to mind that is central to the whole episode is the theme of freedom or liberty and the promise that it offers. From my analysis, I could break this down further into 2. That's the freedom to think, to invent, and the freedom to question. And secondly, is freedom from coercion and abuse of authority. And abuse of freedom from coercion and abuse of authority. So why is freedom important? Well, the answer is simply that freedom is an inherent good. You cannot have human dignity or respect human dignity and progress without people being free. And if you look at the history of humanity, whether it's the slave trade or colonial rule or any other forms of abuse, generally people will always seek to fight for their freedom, because human progress has always depended on humans being free to exploit their talents and to maximize their potential. Now, to put these things into context and looking at you can call it a political history of the world. In 1651, Thomas Hobbes wrote in the Leviathan that, life in its natural state is nasty, brutish, and short. And so to move away from that nasty, brutish, and short existence, it's necessary to ensure that there's a government or, an ordered administration and management of public affairs. Now, I don't think anyone can argue with that. And at the same time, you must also appreciate the times at which Thomas Hobbes was writing. This was immediately after the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, after a 30-year war in Europe, whereby, you can imagine a whole 30 years of war and these chaos and everything. And when he was writing, he's saying, no, we can't have this kind of system whereby, it's a Tammany Hall, everyone for himself or herself. We need a government to keep the peace and to have the monopoly of violence so that we don't keep on killing each other and living like wild animals and killing each other over resources and, petty fights or whatever else it is that humans fight over. And so from there, we see the necessity of ordered existence and government to maintain the order. In 1762, the French philosopher, although he lived most of his life in Switzerland, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, wrote in The Social Contract that every man is born free, but everywhere he's in chains. So we are born free, but we find ourselves being shackled by all sorts of chains. Well, they may be the chains of the government, the chains of the society, the local community, and populist thoughts. And so coming down to having laid out that background, coming down to the historical record, there's a clear pattern. Societies that are freer tend to have better outcomes. I don't think anyone can argue about that. If you look at the economic history of the world, the highest levels of growth tend to come from societies that are freer. There's always this argument that, well, China is still a closed political system and it has become much wealthier. That is true. But then, if you look at the side of economic freedom, in 1982, when the Chinese government adopted the free market economy, I mean, it's socialist or communist in name, that's when China just exploded because people were free to trade goods and services, to invent and, to make money and uplift their standards of living. And so if you look at it from that point of view, I mean, freer societies tend to have better outcomes and people are free to exploit their resources and basically to enjoy the bounties of the world. However, we see some tension here. That is, there's a paradox. That is, to escape from the world of Thomas Hobbes, that's wars and chaos and disorder, you need a degree of order that a government maintains. And it's from there that we see governments and public authorities as we know of them. Now, of course, so human ingenuity, whether it is better food production methods, steamships and cotton ginneries of the industrial revolution to the more recent ones, cars, aeroplanes, the internet and everything, all these depend on people being free to think up solutions to the problems that society faces, to challenge conventional wisdom, the way things have always been done. Someone come and tell you, this must be like this because this way we have always done these things, and to create products that people solve these problems, which people are willing to pay for. Now, that brings us now to a free market where men and women who are free in a society can exchange goods and services for whatever it is that they're producing. Now, moving on to the next slide. Now, we're going back to the experience of Jonathan. This classic tension plays out, and it's quite relatable in our modern experience. And so the tension plays itself in three forms. One, we see individual effort, innovation, and ingenuity against state control of innovative individuals. The young lady, Alisa, is arrested because she tried to innovate and come up with something that will make for a more efficient woodworking sector or economy, if you can call it that. Then secondly, the effects of such control on individual liberty and the society at large. You see Alisa being denied her freedom simply for a new invention that made it easier to chop down trees. At the same time, Jonathan is also risking life and limb when you see that big guy who seems to be the foreman of the woodworkers threatening Jonathan, saying that even him, an eye must be kept on him and he should be on the lookout. He's a troublemaker. That's the actual word he used. Then thirdly, which we'll come to this later, is the limits and extent of public power. Because you see, we need to have governments for an ordered existence. But then what are the limits or the proper limits within which the government should exercise its authority as against the other proposition, namely that you need to have men and women being free in the society to determine their own destinies and to trade and make lives better for themselves. So the excuse that was given for the arrest of Alisa and denying her freedom is that she would throw the woodworking men out of employment. Now, this brings me now to the theory of the invisible hand of the market. What is the invisible hand of the market? Now, it is a theory that was invented or propagated by Adam Smith. Adam Smith is one of the thinkers of the Scottish Enlightenment who have contributed a great deal to our understanding of how the free market works and how economics, the finer details of economics. Now, what the invisible hand has it is this. When you've got free individuals pursuing their own self-interest in a free market by voluntary exchange, you have better outcomes than what we can call the visible hand of the government. Now, perhaps the most widely quoted statement of Smith is that it is not from the benevolence or the kindness of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we get our dinner, but from their regard to their own interests. Because when you go to the shops to buy whatever it is you're buying, you buy it for yourself. But at the same time, the seller is selling it to make a profit, not exactly. I mean, the butcher doesn't sell you meat because he wants you to be full. No, he's addressing his or her own interest. I want to make a profit out of this and so on and so forth. And now from that aggregation of people in a society selling things, so you need beef, you go to the butcher. The butcher is self-interested. I want to sell meat because I want to make a profit. But in the course of doing so, he or she satisfies your demand. At the same time, the butcher also goes to a farmer to buy a goat, to buy a cow or a goat or whatever else it is. He or she doesn't do so, and the farmer doesn't sell because, the farmer wants the butcher to have the animal. The farmer is selling because he or she wants to make a profit from his or her trade. That is that's farming. And so from that aggregation of these exchanges, you see some sense of equilibrium, so that you don't need the government to tell you produce this, produce that. No, it's from our self-interest that we actually come together in the free market to offer what it is we best produce, and we buy that which you need. And the underlying theory of economics is that human needs are insatiable, but the resources to produce them are limited. And so it is from these forces of demand and supply that suppliers and producers are brought together for the process of production and delivery of these goods and services to the market to satisfy human wants. And of course, it goes on progressively in the sense that the more we produce, the more we improve on forms of production and so on. Life gets better. And we can see today in the gadgets that we use, it's much easier to communicate today because we have got the internet and all these instantaneous forms of communication. And, you can think also of cars, railways, aeroplanes, and so on that make it easier for people to move from point A to point B. Now, closely related to the invisible hand is spontaneous order. Thomas Hobbes talks about creating order in a society. But then the free market also produces a spontaneous order of its own without the thumb of the government. If I can give you a relatable example, supermarket queues. Now, none of us likes waiting. I certainly don't like waiting in line at the supermarket. So if you go to a supermarket, there are several queues. Almost always, the queues will always be of similar length. And you ask yourself, why? Is there a police officer who tells people, now this queue is too long, so go to the other one? No. They don't do that. People simply come and look at the queues for themselves, and they see, you figure out that queue will move much faster. That guy has got a much bigger shopping basket. The trolley is full. That will take some time. So I'm better off in this longer line that has got people with fewer items. And you see from that, the lines end up getting a bit even. So that's what is spontaneous order. And so bringing it down to what we are talking about is that free individuals cooperating in a marketplace may end up creating free, superior working systems free of coercive action by some government fiat. So if you are thinking in terms of the production of food and so on, farmers who are free to produce and to bring their product to market do a much better job at gauging the market than a government fiat that tells you, can you produce this, can you produce that in these quantities, and so on and so forth, with price controls and all that. And if you look at communist history, the Soviet Union had a culture of the government forcing farmers to produce this, and the government directing you must be a doctor, you must do this. But in spite of the propaganda and all the noise about, oh, we have produced so much grain this year and so on, famine was almost always there. And if you look at the writings of someone like Amartya Sen, when he talked of freedom in his book, well, the title is escaping, but it's something freedom. Development as freedom. He says, look, it doesn't matter. Democracies have always had a much better chance at fighting famines because people are free to produce, and if they can't produce because of weather, adverse weather, and so on, you can always import them as opposed to in a closed economy. Now, spontaneous order was developed by Michael Polanyi. He was a British-Hungarian economist, but it was mostly advanced by Friedrich Hayek. He was an Austrian economist, but ended up in the United States shortly after the Second World War. Now, many things that we take for granted today, whether it's a legal system, national dresses, cultural expressions, for the most part evolved organically. That is, spontaneous order from the actions of individuals pursuing their interests in a vast and uncoordinated marketplace where the asymmetries of information are dealt with by the individuals rather than imposed by the government. And if you look at that island of Corampo, and I think the name is a play on corruption, the all-knowing government that decides who should be a woodworker and what woodworkers should do and so on does a far worse job of it than private individuals. Now, if you look at economic terms, things like prices, the prices of goods and innovation, which leads to better quality products and lifestyle, are outgrowths of spontaneous order rather than a ruler's fiat. So you can think of such modern things, conveniences like M-Pesa and so on. Those are products of spontaneous order as opposed to the directed order of a government. And this comes about as a result of the free market. And so to take the discussion further, the order we usually see is not planned, it's organic. It comes from the way people relate in a society. Economists have a word for this. They call it the theory of unintended consequences. Now, the theory of unintended consequences is a very, very important theory, particularly when you think about government action and public policy. Very often, we see well-intentioned policy measures ostensibly to protect society, but then usually they have bad unintended consequences. And one thing that perhaps seems not to be well appreciated by policymakers today is this. You don't measure the policy by the intention of the policymaker. You measure policy by its outcome. An example is price control. Anytime you have price control, there would be shortages. Those who were around in the mid-1980s and 1990s, before price controls were abolished, would recall that anytime the budget was about to be read, sugar would disappear. And the reason why sugar would disappear is not that there was no sugar. Business persons would hoard sugar. Why? Because they're waiting for the budget to hear whether the government will announce an increase in the price of sugar, and then they release it to the market at the much higher price. But today, we don't have such shortages of sugar, gas, and whatever else. Why? Because the free market solves these problems. You set your price, and whoever supplies, and we have all the goods we have. We don't have shortages, because whenever there are price controls, you will end up with shortages. And once you have shortages, people's standard of living goes under, and others may decide, why produce when I cannot sell it at the price? Or we also have got legislation to enforce equal outcomes, so that you say, well, at the end of this economic year, we want everyone to be equal. You cannot enforce equal outcomes. What the government should be concerned with is ensuring equality of opportunity, not equal outcomes. The other more modern fads, things like green economy and the like, which may be well intended, but then the overall effect is to run people out of business. A good example is the government's instruction that people must put solar panels and all these kind of things, and go through some very weighty impact assessments or costly impact assessments. Now, they may be well intended, but the manner in which the government is going about it is the wrong way, because they simply impose burdens, particularly on smaller businesses, which more often than not cannot comply. And the policy goal of a better green economy and so on is not met. You can look at the energy sector in this country. Now, gas became very expensive from what it was in the year 2007, 2008, because the government imposed very hefty taxes on gas. At the same time, the same government says chopping trees for firewood and charcoal is an offense. But we see what happens. There's virtually no household in this country that does not use charcoal. But the reason they use charcoal is because gas is expensive. Why is gas expensive? Although it's a much cleaner source of energy than charcoal, because of government action. And so the government says, yes, we are protecting the environment, we are stopping people from chopping trees because you have made it a criminal offense. But then who enforces that law? And the outcomes are far worse for the economy and for people, because when you use charcoal, it causes respiratory illness. But people use charcoal because gas is expensive. And so, you have got this kind of argument about the government's saying its intention is this or that, but the policy outcome is totally different, because people will always adapt to what the government says. Now, coming to the third lesson, which we can draw is the rule of law. That's the proper use of public authority. Public power and public authority, which Thomas Hobbes said is important to maintain order in a society, should not be abused or deployed to prevent innovation or weaponized against those who dare to think differently. And as we have seen from the example of Corampo, Alisa is arrested for inventing a new efficient means of chopping wood. I mean, and one wonders why, when the common sense behind it is quite clear for everyone to see. At the same time, Jonathan is also forced to stop asking why. He's asking why very sensibly, because, I mean, the justice of the case for Alisa is quite in order. Now, in the contemporary context, the use of government power can clearly be seen in, rather in the contemporary economic context, can be seen in state-protected cartels. This may be intended or not, hostility to imports and a false sense of national pride in some national champion industry, so that the government comes and says, oh, we are protecting you, we want to bring development and so on. But development doesn't exactly come from the government. Development comes from the people, and the free market, rather than the government directing development. And we can think of many sectors. For instance, look at aviation in Africa. Africa is least connected by air, and air transport in Africa is very costly. And Africa has got poor road and rail infrastructure. And so it stands to reason that perhaps air travel from one country to the other should be cheaper, but it's not. Why? Because every country wants a protected national airline. And because you have a protected national airline, landing fees for foreign airlines in your airports become very, very expensive and not worth the hassle if you cannot fly there and make a profit. And so what you have is a very fragmented aviation market with many national airlines which are loss-making, when the continent would be better served by two or three, large continental airlines, of course, taking into account the purchasing power of the persons who buy tickets. In contrast, in South America, you have the Latin American airlines, LATAM, and it's a continental airline for the countries. In Scandinavia, you have SAS, which is a national airline, or energy. Africa is the least consumer of energy And we know that for Africa to industrialize, you need energy. The Inga Dam in DRC would generate far more energy to power Africa's industry, but the project is still an intention. Why? Because there is poor cooperation, and there are also problems with the rule of law, corruption and all these kind of things, so that government power is not used actually to protect investments and, to compensate people. It is used to extort bribes and from investors and so on. And so there we are. Every country has got its own small electricity company that is protected by law. It's a monopoly. You cannot compete with it. You try to set up your own, the government will come. In the same way, you've seen those people coming to arrest Alisa and Jonathan to stop you from being innovative and offering cheaper energy, cheaper solutions that would power development. To be sure, there has been some policy change in Africa. So, for instance, we have got these regional economic communities such as COMESA, ECOWAS, and more lately, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Now, these are institutions that are reflective of free market principles. That is, people should be free to buy and sell, to try and capture the market, make use of your energies and your intellect to produce goods that you can put out to the market, because it's only by liberalizing trade and the factors of production that we can unleash Africa's potential. There will always be the fear that, some of us will be thrown out of jobs and so on and so forth, but the good that comes from innovation has always been shown over the long term to be much better. In the early 1990s, many government secretaries feared the computer technology, thinking that they'd be thrown out of work. But then if you look at the benefits of computer technology, the ease with which you can run your own small business, do your own spreadsheets and work out your figures, or create your own programs for retail sector and so on, using things like Microsoft Access and so on, have been far much greater, have offered far greater benefits than trying to shut out computers and sticking to typewriters. Of course, it's one of those things that we can't much relate to today, but that's what it used to be. And so we as Africans should advocate for more free market policies, and these business of the government trying to over-regulate everything, and you have to seek 10, 20, 30, 40 licenses for you to do business, each of which is very, very expensive. All those are things that prevent the growth of market economies. And if we need to boost trade and build a bigger continental market, then we must move in that direction. And so the proper role of the government in this context should be to ensure a playing field for all market players and not to be a gatekeeper for established and uncompetitive players. This is a phenomenon that we witness all around us. Governments wanting to control all the means of production and directing what you must do, what you cannot do. And you have very many inefficient state companies that crowd out what would be more efficient and competitive private sector players. And that is what ails Africa. This is something which the French statesman Frédéric Bastiat, writing in 1850, his book is called The Law, and it's one of my, although it was published in French, so the original title is La Loi. He talked about legal plunder, where in the name of legality, because the law says this, and I'm quoting directly what you can see on the screen, the law is used to destroy its own objective. It is applied to annihilating the justice that it was supposed to maintain, to limiting and destroying rights, which its real purpose was to protect. So you can see Alisa and Jonathan being persecuted because the law says, no, you cannot come and invent these things because we want to maintain full employment for the woodworkers, even though they are very inefficient. Of course, in a free market, those fellows would have been overtaken by events, and you'd have cheaper wood produced at much lower cost and much more efficiently. And at the same time, those fellows would probably have something better to do, as Jonathan suggested. Can they make houses and other items instead of trying to chop a tree by beating it with a wood? And so, as a point of final reflection, from Jonathan Gullibal's experience, The key is to growth and development and securing individual liberty, and to do so within the proper bounds of the rule of law. That is, the law should not be used to shackle innovators, inventors, and make criminals out of honest men and women who simply are trying to make a living and to advance themselves. So the free market, the rule of law to guarantee property rights, the enforcement of contracts, and also law to prevent the abuse of power are the best guarantors of a prosperous Africa. And it comes as no surprise that we are still grappling with these problems of poverty in Africa. Why? You can see Africa is a continent that trades least with itself. Just 14% of trade in Africa is with intra-African trade. In Europe, it's almost 70%. In South Asia, it's well above 50%, almost 60. Almost 60%. It has even been said that in many respects, it's much cheaper to fly to West Africa by passing through Europe than going directly from East or Southern Africa. Why? Not because there is no aeroplane willing to take that route, but because there are all sorts of regulations put in place by the governments in the name of protecting a national airline, and some false sense of national pride. But then you see, the business actually goes now to foreign airlines, and we here in Africa continue complaining, these whites are screwing us, and so on. We've got very many rules that prevent the equivalent of Africa's Alisas from progressing and sharing their inventions. So for prosperity to be achieved, you need economic freedom without unnecessary rules and regulations and bureaucrats to enforce them. And of course, where you have bureaucrats to enforce many rules, many of which are senseless, more often than not, they simply breed corruption and rent seeking. I can give you a good example from my trade. There is a statute, an act of parliament, that is known as the Land Control Act. The Land Control Act is supposed to regulate agricultural land. So you're not supposed to chop your agricultural piece of land to some smaller size. Now, before you do anything or you transfer your land to sell agricultural land, you must go before the Land Control Board. And the purpose of the Land Control Board is to ensure efficient agriculture. But we all know what the land control boards are for. They're simply rent-seeking opportunities. You go there with the application, they don't look, it's not even looked at. What the people want is some money. So if you pay off the land control board members, you easily get your consent to transfer land. There has been discussion about changes to that law because of the corruption that it has led to. But the problem is, even in those discussions, no one is seriously considering removing that land control, those land control boards. They should simply be removed. They are not needed, and their purpose, they serve no purpose other than simply having rent seekers in office. And that's a direction that we need to move to. So if you want to sell your plot that is agricultural, you cannot without going before the land control board. And one wonders, so what about property rights and so on? If you have to pay off some a small committee of people who are put there, but they end up doing the opposite of what they're supposed to do, it has simply become a money minting venture. And so we must encourage efforts to free Africa's economies by promoting free enterprise systems and the rule of law, because you cannot have a free enterprise system without the rule of law, because the rule of law is what will guarantee competition, so that even if you have a small business and you're up against a big player, the big player will be constrained from abusing its power, or the government parastatal, whereby it can put in place laws and rules to prevent competition. An example is the power sector in this country. We have got a monopoly, that's Kenya Power, KPLC. You cannot set up your own private company to generate power and sell power. If you want to generate power, you must seek a license, but then you can only sell your power to KPLC. You cannot sell it independently. And you see, that shackles the energy sector, which would very easily, lead to cheap energy. There's a lot of energy that is produced, particularly by tea factories. They produce a lot of energy from their operations, but then the power that they generate, they don't, unless they use it themselves, they must sell it to KPLC, but they cannot retail it to the power market. So they cannot sell the electricity to their neighbors. Their neighbors have to go to KPLC, pay a very huge fee for connection, wait several months, perhaps, pay someone to speed up the process. And, yet if it was a private company, they would actually do it much easier and much faster to the locals. And so by freeing Africa's Alisas to invent, to produce, to think, and also allowing the Jonathans of our societies to challenge and to question conventional wisdoms, we only then can we unleash Africa's potential. So I've put in place some selected readings. Two of them are by Adam Smith, The Theory of Moral Sentiments and the Wealth of Nations. We also have the Law by Frederic Bastiat. Those are out of copyright. We have The Road to Serfdom and The Constitution of Liberty by Friedrich Hayek. Then George Aite's writings. One of the books that I like most by him is Applied Economics for Africa, because it actually shows, it draws out an economic history of Africa, how Africa, traditional African societies always traded between and amongst themselves, and we didn't have famines and so on. It's only this modern state, which came post-colonial state, that tries to control the means of production and over-regulate economies, even in the most of in the most unhelpful of manners that actually cause far worse problems. And also Why Africa is Poor by Greg Mills. That one is much more recent. So what can you do? You should be engaged, organize, engage in public participation whenever called to do so, and you examine and critique proposed laws. One of the laws was technology. There was a law that was proposed to create a regulatory body for farmers. It was defeated. There was another one also that sought to create a technology licensing committee. So you can imagine, how do you start licensing computer whizzes? You can't. A lot of these things are better left to the free market. We also had a design bill that sought to regulate creatives. How do you regulate creatives? The very fact of being a creative is that you're free to experiment with the art and so on. And I mean, telling artists and others to seek licenses, one wonders who comes up with these problems. Then also, crony capitalism must also be called out when you see abuse of market power and so on. That should also be called out. And you must also write on LinkedIn and other social media, share your thoughts, and you can follow and engage with free market advocates. Liberty Sparks, that you're here, shows that you already have a foot in that direction. Students for Liberty. There's a Senegalese lady who lives in the United States, Magat Wad, and she's an advocate of free enterprise for Africa and African Libertarian, which I curate, and also, to try and build a strong force of advocacy for liberty, the rule of law, and individual autonomy. Now, I was already introduced. Those are my contacts, my email address. So I'm sure you can get this from the curators and organizers of this event. So thank you very much. I think I've overshot my time. I was supposed to speak for about 20-30 minutes. I overshot my time. I'll now probably leave it out to I'll take it back to Ronnie, who will take it up and probably invite questions. I'm seeing a question there. Festus Kiprotich. Now, Alisa is a character in the cartoon that we saw, and so I'm using her as an example of, the rank and file African or player in the economy who thinks up something new, but then is shackled. Sorry, actually, see, Moki has already answered the question. Right, so I'll hand it back to the moderator. You can take it up from there.
That was a very powerful session. Guys, it's now time for the Q&A, and you can drop your questions on the chat box, and we'll be asking them one by one, and let us draw and ask them so that Wakili over here be able to respond to them. Meanwhile, if you check the chat box, the link to his attendance sheet, and the secret code is order. For the very fact that got in, they didn't have to answer. For the rest of us, we have to answer. So any question that we have, for Wakili time. And of course, Wakili, thank you so much for taking to be with us today to respond to our questions and to as well educate us on the matter that we've been speaking about. Any questions on the chat box?
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
My colleagues, you can help me. If there's any question that I'm missing that I have not picked on. Okay. Meanwhile, I am sharing a link on the chat. Just when you click on it, enter this secret code, and I need you to answer. I need you to answer both questions. Just click on that link, enter that code, and you can answer both questions. And Wakili.
Yeah.
Let me just get it. I was taking notes somewhere. So the problem is, as men, we can't multitask, so I have to look for it. Yes. I think there's a question that was asked that I want to direct to you. And the question is, who introduced the concept of the invisible hand?
It was mostly spoken about by Adam Smith. He's the one who started the invisible hand, to say the invisible hand of the market would do a much better job than having a government that tells you, you produce this, you produce that. If you free people, farmers and others, to exploit their talents, and it takes us also to the theory of specialization and division of labor by David Ricardo and others, that you specialize in what you're best at and you sell your item to the market. Yeah. So that is it.
Thank you so much. Guys, please check the link. It's on the chat box. The code is also on the chat box. I am bringing up the slide. Of course, what I just want to pick up is what keywords you picked from today's session. You can just share one word. And as well, just to know, with one word, please appreciate today's speaker. So please begin responding so that I can bring it up. I'm waiting for at least 2 people to send in their feedback so that I can bring it up. But also, maybe as we wait for that, Wakili, are you able to find the relevance between the stories of as somebody who's probably not new to all these issues that we are addressing as Liberty Sparks and the tenets of liberty? And generally, my question is maybe just to ask if you can find the intersection between the stories and the most contemporary issues that not only Kenyans are going through, but Africa as a continent is going through.
Yeah, that's part of the policy discussions on Africa. I was at the COMESA conference, and we also had a conference with IRSK. This society of ours, International Relations Society of Kenya, we organize a conference with COMESA, and everyone comes here and talks very flowery about freeing Africa's economies and letting us trade and exchange our goods and services, but nobody seems to want to walk the talk. At every time you try to set up a business, there's this license, that license, and sometimes you try to question, why is this here? You're told it's because, that's the way things have always been done. You just can't do these things without a license. It has become so crazy that now you had that bill, I think it was the Information Technology Regulatory Authority bill, that if you are supposed to be a computer whiz, you do things online, you must pay for a license from the whatever body they had proposed. It's an oxymoronic thing. We also had an agriculture bill. There's a lady called Shina Raikundalia on LinkedIn. She tracks these agriculture bills. And there was a time there had been a bill that had been proposed for farmers to start paying the government licenses to produce. Now one wonders, I mean, is that the way to fight food security, to assure food security in Africa? No, I mean, it's all illogical. And I can see someone saying Jonathan, as an outsider, clearly sees the illogicality of some of those taxes. And it's more or less the same thing that we are dealing with.
Very well, very well. That is well put. And of course,
no, I see a question there asking how will the government earn? The government is supposed to make money from taxes paid after people trade on produced goods and services. The idea that the government is supposed to raise money from licensing fees and others is, I think, totally flawed, because if you look at a licensing fee, that's money you pay to the government before you do your business. So even before your first customer comes to pay, you have already forked out a lot of money. As we speak, Safaricom in Ethiopia has never made profits. For one, they have to pay a very high license fee over, I don't know how many, they're running into how many billions of shillings. Up to date, they have not made any profits. Of course, there is a case for customs duties and import taxes, either in the interest of health and so on. But then these have got to be measured and targeted, because if you think about capital goods that you use to produce other goods, then those ones should be, I mean, it should be easy to import them. At some time, I had a friend of mine who wanted to set up a company that would manage waste. He did all his maths and how he's going to buy, to import things from China. And he had put his capital investment at 5 to 7 million shillings max. But then when it came now, when the rubber met the road, dealing with Kenyan officialdom, he discovered his costs will actually shoot up to 70 million. Now, how can you profitably make a return when all those costs, and those are not costs that are going into your production, those are simply costs that you're paying fees to the government and so on and so forth. And he simply gave up on the business idea and moved to something else. Now, this is a country that has got problems with waste management. Every day, you go to the county assembly of Nairobi, they're always talking about how to manage waste, and we have got the Environment Act and all these things. But nobody seems to have a solution to this. Why? Not because there's no solution, but because, I mean, there are so many logical rules and regulations that are put in place here.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, our listeners and participants for today. I can see from feedback you've given us, quite a number of you have picked quite a number of terms. We have law used to destroy liberty, we have order, we have abuse of power. And of course, when I get to what you have to say about today's speaker, of course, Wakili, you can see there are very colorful words that have been used to describe you today and even to just appreciate you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining the session today. We know that it's about 8 episodes that we are supposed to be doing. So this is the first. We have a lot more. And of course, if you've been part of all these sessions right from the word go, I believe you've been picking up new ideas, new terms, and things that have been jogged and exactly what we are speaking about. And so from us to all of you, we say thank you.
There's a question I think I've not answered by Naomi Makovo. Says, why do you think the people who live there fail to see these obvious problems? Well, often it's because the government doesn't allow, they are not free to express their views or to think independently of that. And if you try to think, you saw what happened to Jonathan. So everyone prefers to keep quiet until, it becomes like a pressure cooker when it all explodes. And we've seen it several times in Burkina Faso and others, in Syria. The government just is toppled overnight in Burkina Faso and so on. So the reason they fail to see is not that they fail to see, they can see it, but they cannot express themselves for fear of being arrested and so on. And even if they don't see it, then it behoves upon those who can see through these smoke and mirrors and the smoke screen to actually speak about it, write about it, blog about it, and so on. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, I'd not seen that that question, or rather, I'd not appreciated that there was a question at the bottom of it. So
No
thank
question.
you.
No
Yeah.
worries. No worries, Wakili. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and see you in the next session. Have a wonderful Friday, and let it usher a very wonderful and prosperous weekend. Asanteni.
Okay, thank you, and have a good evening, everyone, and thanks for listening.